Good afternoon or good morning. Thank you for joining us here today. My name is Dr. Dustin Sachs, and really excited to be here. Really glad to be here. For those of our members who are tuning in from the West Coast, from the California area, we are thinking about those in the Palisades area, the areas where the fires are going on. Please feel free to reach out if you guys need anything from us, if there's anything that we can do. But all of us here at Cyber Risk Alliance, at the Cyber Risk Collaborative, are sending our thoughts and prayers and wishing you all safe journey over the next couple days. But that's not what we're here for today. Today we are here to talk about data privacy. We're really talking about how CISOs can build privacy first strategies for regulatory compliance. It's a topic that has been of real importance and real conversation amongst the Cyber Risk Collaborative over the last couple of months, and we're really excited to finally tackle this topic on a webinar. For those who may not be familiar with the Cyber Risk Collaborative is part of CRA. We are here to accelerate career development, to offer decision support, but offer really the tools and techniques and the information and the resources to help all of you do your jobs and do the work of cybersecurity that much better. We're also here to help build a network, build a community, build your personal brand, and provide 24/7 access to your peers, to tools, to solutions. And we do that in a number of ways. Obviously, we do that through leadership development. We're going to be starting a series of these webinars around leadership development topics in the next couple of months. We also look at workforce development, intelligence, and insights. We'll be releasing our latest CISO Top 10 report next week. And then, of course, through peer collaboration, personal brand amplification, and most importantly, our CISO developed tools and solutions. And for those of you who are members who didn't see this email, and for those of you who this is the first time you're joining, really excited to share that we have released our resource toolkits. Resource toolkits are 18 at this point and growing, topic-specific kits that include both guidance documents, but more importantly, the tools and resources and templates you need to implement the guidance that is in the guidance documents. All of our guidance documents, all of our tools and resources are CISO developed. They are built by our community. They are curated by our community. And the one that that you'll hear me talk a lot about today is the data privacy and protection CISO toolkit, resource toolkit, which has, as of today, the most updated guidance document, which is our CISO developed guide to data privacy and protection. It's a 35-page document that includes all of the information that will help you really address data privacy, and more importantly, it then is accompanied by tools, templates, additional resources to help you do your job better. And we'll be adding to that over the course of the month, and also adding to the other resource toolkits over the next couple of months and throughout the year as well. And the most important thing is not only are these driven by your peers, but they're driven with the goal of helping save time and money. And you'll notice with every toolkit, we've done a really good job and had a really good success in estimating for you the cost savings, so you as a leader can turn to the rest of the business and show how much money and time you can save by using these resources. If you're interested in learning more about these resources, there's a URL available. It's also been put into the chat as well. Please feel free to check it out. Reach out to anybody at the Cyber Risk Collaborative. In the handout section, you'll also find a handout that includes more information about the Cyber Risk Collaborative, and we'll share the email for Tom Ward, who can help answer any questions later on in the presentation. But Shifting to our discussion today, I wanted to introduce our panelists. I'm really excited. We have a powerhouse panel for today's conversation. Please allow me to introduce Justine Phillips, who's the partner and co-chair of the Data and Cyber Practice Group for Baker McKenzie. Chuck Layton, who is a multiple-time CISO and currently the Data Management Officer for San Jacinto College here in Houston. Go H-Town. And then Terrence Jackson, who is the a customer security officer at Microsoft. And I'll allow each of them, I'm going to give each of them a chance to just introduce themselves, share a little bit about their background, and really why this is such an important topic to them. So Justine, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you so much to this group and also attendees for tuning in. I'm passionate about data, and I come at it not through the privacy side, which a lot of privacy lawyers do come to data through privacy. I actually come through cyber, and I had my first data breach in 2011. At the time, it was the largest breach in history, and it activated something in me. And in addition to my pup over here, who is one of the great loves of my life. Cyber happened to be one of the great, and turns out is one of the great loves of my life. So I love sitting in conversation with CISOs. Cybersecurity then led me to privacy because I had a real interest in data and where it lived and who had access to it and all the good ways that you can keep it safe and secure. So now I have the privilege of working at a law firm with 6,500 other attorneys in over 40 countries and looking at both data and cyber comparatively. What are these laws around the world? How can we make informed and good decisions when you're oftentimes one center of excellence managing an entire whole big world? How do we simplify it? Who are the right people? What are the right processes? And what are the technologies that can help serve us? So super excited to be in conversation with this group.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Chuck.
Hey, welcome everyone. So my name's Chuck Layton, and I've been around the industry for quite some time. I've served in most of the C-suite positions. I just moved into the data management role, which encompasses a lot of the privacy issues and stuff we're going to be discussing today, and some of those types of things. I've been protecting data for more than 20 years and trying to come up with the right avenues to do that. So this should be an interesting topic for all of us here. It's a little chilly in Houston for us. Usually we're in the 90s or 100, but we're in the 40s this week. So getting used to the new change in the weather.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Chuck. And Terrence, last but not least.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks again for hosting me. And like the panelists, I've been doing this for a while. I've been in IT and security, 20 plus years. Data privacy really took a new life for me, probably about 7 or so years ago. During a CISO role that I had, I also was the privacy officer. So I had to come up to speed pretty quickly on privacy laws and regulations. So I actually did a 2-year program in law school, not to be a lawyer, but I just needed to learn the laws and the regulations. But that was very, I would say, insightful. And especially now, as we're looking into, this AI world, this agentic era we're moving into, it just makes privacy of data even more paramount. So, I say you really can't have security without data privacy. So they're one and the same, because when you look at the attacks that are happening, all of the threat actors are coming after your data, and you want to do as much as you can to keep it secure, but also keep it private. So I'm just happy to be here and looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for being here. For those of you who are tuning in who have questions or want to participate in chat, please feel free to use the chat function and the Q&A function as well in the platform. You'll see those two bubbles. One of them is the bubble to the far left. That is the little blue bubble that's got says studio chat. The other one is Q&A. Please submit your questions. We will do our best to get to as many of them as we can. But so, to kind of set the stage, obviously, when we think of cyber, for us, for those of us, who have been in the industry for a while, we look at cyber, we think of it very, very differently than the average consumer. But when for the average consumer, for the average non-technical person, the first kind of experience, or their most uh, regular experience with cyber, is they get a letter in the mail or in their email, hey, your data has been breached, or they turn on the news and now we see on the news so and so has been referred to, has had a breach. Um and and we see these and we hear about them, but so privacy, really, to me at least, is almost the entry point for most people um into cybersecurity. And for most consumers, it's a very private, it's a very personal thing, because it's your data. It's your social security number, it's your kid's social security number, it's your spouse's social security number. And going back to even the OPM breach, the government, the Office of Management and Budget, where you had people who were impacted by a breach that had no connection to that organization themselves. They were a secondary person on a form from a person who was connected. And we see that a lot. We see that a lot more. You're on a your data is part of a healthcare organization that, or an insurance company that gets breached, because, and now you've got family members and others that are impacted by it. But how do I think the first question really, and this is to you, Justine, is what are some of, like, the core principles when you think about addressing privacy and taking a privacy first and a privacy focused approach as an organization? What are some of those core principles, some core ideals that you should be thinking about?
Well, thanks for teeing that up. So there are fundamental information privacy practices that are out there that you can aspire to. I think the threshold issue that everybody should best understand for their organization is, what is that data that you hold and what are you trying to protect? So at a threshold, most organizations have employees. Most organizations have some secret sauce and intellectual property that they want to protect. And sometimes, if you're a consumer-facing organization, you have consumer data. If you have a website, you might have consumer data. So understanding the types of data that you have then drives the principles that inform your program. So I think that a great thing to do, and it's all interdisciplinary. Privacy, just like cyber, just like AI management and governance, is really about understanding what the risk is, understanding what the benefits are, and then taking actions that are consistent with the risk not exceeding the benefits. And to do that, it's interdisciplinary.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, one of the things that we often hear on these types of webinars, regardless of what the topic is knowing your data, knowing your systems, knowing whatever, asset management of some sort, asset inventory, having a good inventory and thinking
But
of data as
most
an asset is
assets,
super
Dustin,
important.
and I'm sorry to interrupt on this, but this comes up a lot. Most asset inventories do not contain data elements. So if you
Correct.
have a
Yeah.
good asset map, drive down, take that asset map and go, okay, what sort of applications now sit within these assets? And within those applications, what sort of data elements do we have? And do those data elements have things like encryption, or are we obfuscating in some way the protected data elements? So yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Viewing data as an asset is an important thing, and that will help you build that robust asset database that you're talking about, asset data inventory as well. Chuck, as somebody who now is responsible for for the data at an educational institution, obviously one of the biggest challenges is you've got your students and the people involved that have their privacy rights, their privacy concerns, and you're holding pretty much every piece of sensitive information, because you've got health information, you've got educational information, you've got financial information. I mean, there's a reason why for many, many, many years educational institutions have been such a top target, because they're a one-stop shop but you also, as a university, and I know you've worked in organizations that have transparency and open information situations, being at NASA and other places where there's freedom of information available as well. How do you balance protecting your consumers' privacy rights while also enabling the business to do business and to report on the things you've got to report on?
Yeah. So if you think back to the early days in security, one of the things we always talked about was building security into the programs. Well, privacy is no different. So in order to deal with this and handle the transparency, especially in a university, we have to adopt a privacy by design. And what I mean by that is, I don't like the term proactive. I like preemptive. And what you have to do is anticipate what those breaches may look like, and what internal controls do you need to put in place to be able to block those attempts from accessing or breaching your data and getting it out. And like you were saying earlier, I was part of the OPM breach. They got everything from me, from my fingerprints to my top secret SCI clearance and all that data. So I've had to put different privacy pieces in place to protect my identity as of today. So that's one of the ways that I would do that. You also have to have clear communication about data usage around the organization and be able to protect that. It's very easy for employees to make mistakes and stuff of that nature there and let data or get out of, send it to the wrong person or some of those things. So it's a lot of education that has to take place with the staff and also the students about protecting their data.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think now, I guess, Chuck, now we know where the information about why Pluto got demoted came from. I guess that was all on your hard drive. So, thanks for sharing that information with us. But Terrence, obviously one of the questions that comes up is, what role does the CISO and does executive leadership, in your mind, play in prioritizing privacy? It's oftentimes, and I think we talked about this in the pre-calls, it's oftentimes one of those where the CISO will go, not my problem, that's for legal, or executives will go, yeah, you know what, we don't have that much, we're not worried about the data, we don't have that much, we're doing business between businesses, we don't need to worry about this data. um, you know how important is it for executive leadership to be involved, and for executive leadership to appreciate the role they play, and what is that role in your mind?
That's a great question. Executive leadership absolutely plays a crucial role in prioritizing, privacy first frameworks, where it's privacy by design, and really thinking through, what that looks like. Justine said something that was super important, and it goes back to knowing what type of data that you're, collecting, processing, storing. Oftentimes, organizations don't really know. I mean, they have an asset inventory, but they don't really have a data inventory or a data map. But it's really getting the understanding of what type of data you have. Where are you doing business? Are there sovereignty, issues at play? And when I was, I kind of self-nominated to be privacy officer because um, I was at that point holding the liability if something went left. So I at least wanted to have some say into the controls that we were putting in place, but also educating the board on why privacy was important, why we needed to implement controls. And oftentimes you have to, I'm a big proponent of speaking the language of the business in a way that they can understand it. So we had to talk about the punitive side to back them into the controls we needed to put in place to avoid those type of, scenarios. So, as leaders, we have to allocate, the proper resources, but to get those resources, we often have to articulate a clear why. And that absolutely is a top-down approach that, the CISO often finds himself in the scenario where, we're not the data owner, but if something goes awry, we're going to be held accountable. And being able to articulate that and partner with the business on the data. It's not just a cyber issue, it's a business issue. HR, if you're doing sales or if you're, software as a service, one of the things that comes top of mind, I was at an organization that didn't have a cookie privacy banner, and this was post GDPR. And there were customers hitting that website from places where, we should have been, showing consent banners for them to opt in instead of opting them in and doing opt out. So in short, that was a long, short answer, but, executive leadership plays a crucial role in setting the tone so a proper foundation can be understood on, privacy laws, regulations, and putting those resources in place to govern that program.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, stepping back a little bit as well, we're here on January 9th, 2025. I know that, for example, here in Texas, our data privacy law just came online, really kind of just came online. And organizations now have, I believe, and Justine, correct me if I'm wrong, till January, I think, of next year in Texas to kind of fall in line. But Justine, what trends in global privacy regulations should CISOs be paying attention to? And I think you and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, when you're assessing the global privacy landscape, how do you figure out which is the right one to focus on?
Yeah. Well, privacy is a really big topic, and it really start with what kind of organization are you? Are you B2B or are you B2C? Are you direct to consumers or do you have customers? That is going to be your first step. Second is, what industry are you regulated by and who are your big regulators? So understanding who can put your organization out of business is really important. Where's your big risk pocket? Do you have class action litigation? If you're operating and doing business in the US and you have a website present in the US, class action litigation should be on your radar. I'm very mindful that we are talking to the CISO community, which is often underfunded. Let's get real. There's a lot of important technologies and headcount that you need to add to your team. And privacy is sort of one more thing that most organizations have to deal with. And should there be separate budget, and who does that report to? This is, the most important relationship to actually meaningfully manage risk is the one between legal and information security. And whether that is an internal person to your team or an external person, your legal team should help you manage the risk. And if they are unaware of the risk, for example, they don't really understand the threat vectors that exist on your website, or they don't really understand that, hey, it's really important that we have multi-factor authentication enabled across the environment. If they don't understand why, and they don't understand the consequences, the laws are what put this long tail on risk. And so it's really difficult to move budget for these issues if you don't have your legal team aligned. So to answer your question directly, Dustin, I know I took us a little bit off topic, but I think it's super important as a takeaway and an action item is to take out your legal person and help them better understand their risk in the environment. But when it comes to what law do we comply with, take a risk-based approach. Privacy and AI and cyber, much of the same. There are certain jurisdictions and regions that are going to be more sensitive than others. GDPR, certainly. The nice thing is IP addresses help you geo-filter those locations. So, you don't have to take a GDPR model and apply it enterprise-wide. In fact, I highly recommend you don't do that, particularly if you're in the B2C space in the US, because you're going to lose market share. Instead, take a geographic and a regional approach to your privacy. And that's going to have good ROI. You'll have less pushback from the business units. When it comes to privacy, a big stakeholder in that is not just legal, but it's also your marketing teams that spend a lot of money with these marketing cookies and pixels. And you don't want to ruin that. You don't want to be the person on the team going, you don't get to have this pixel and you have to have everybody on an opt-in model. That is not the way of the US. The US is an opt-out model. Now, I'll just briefly mention there is a little old law called the CIPA, which is a wiretapping law, and it is the California Invasion of Privacy Act. And it's getting a lot of traction with plaintiffs' firms and bringing claims that the organization is wrongfully transmitting data to enterprises like TikTok, Facebook, and other providers like Google. And so that's something you should have on radar. You should better understand these risk pockets and what is driving these decisions, because there are things that you are advocating for from a security perspective that can absolutely help these other initiatives on the privacy and AI front.
Yeah, and I think you raised a really interesting point. It's something you and I talked about a little bit yesterday as well that I thought was really, really great and worth, kind of reiterating is, oftentimes I know, Terrence, Chuck, you and I, in our community, we'll talk and you'll often hear leaders say, well, I'm going to go for the most stringent. I'm going to pick the one that's got the most requirements to it, and I'm going to satisfy that because it'll satisfy everybody else. And I think it's really important to think about it actually the way, Justine, you're saying, which is don't do that, because you might actually be hindering your organization. You might be hindering the doing the revenue side of things. So, look at where is the most risk, where are you gonna face the most disruption to your business if you have a problem, and address that concern. And don't worry if you're not meeting the most stringent requirement. Is a really interesting standpoint. There was a question that was posed in the chat that I think is worth addressing right here, though, Justine. With AI agents coming on, and now you've got non-human identities and what have you, are there any privacy concerns that organizations should be thinking about that now that have been introduced?
Oh, certainly. Thank you for the softball question. I want to focus our attention on vendor assessments and questionnaires. For you CISOs out there, you've been doing this for a decade or more. You've been asking your vendors in your ecosystem, what are your practices? Are you secure? And all of a sudden, the new AI laws, which are oftentimes baked into privacy laws, are also requiring vendor assessments. And privacy laws like GDPR require ROPAs and vendor assessments and data impact assessments. So you have this convergence of privacy, cyber, and AI into one big risk bucket. And what are you doing to manage that? I think if I have to characterize 2025 as being, a theme, it's going to be manage your vendor risk. And how do you meaningfully do that? And that is going to be true for privacy, cyber, and AI. But yes, the laws do require a very specific understanding. And from a AI perspective, I would understand from your organization, are you creating AI or are you just using AI? If you are creating AI and you are feeding the algorithm, you need to better understand where does your data come from? What are the consents that you have in place in order to create that algorithm? There's something called algorithmic disgorgement. That is when a regulator says that you have built an AI tool that has violated privacy rights. That means all those engineers, millions of dollars that you spent on creating this tool will have to be destroyed, including all the data and the algorithm that supports it. So that's really gets the attention of the business. When Terrence, you're talking about, you got to speak their language. When you talk to engineers and your risk professionals, make sure they understand that. The other piece of it is if you're just using AI, this kind of concept, which every organization should be using generative AI in some way. If you're not, you're going to be woefully and dreadfully behind. How are you using generative AI, and are you using it in a way that is secure and safe? So are the benefits of the generative AI exceeding the risk of the generative AI? Now, two things that you can do is one, make sure you have a licensed product from a security perspective, you guys can blacklist some of these ChatGPT 3 free tools and instead license a ChatGPT 4 for your organization and enterprise. So when your employees, they're not going to take sensitive data that you all spend an extraordinary amount of time protecting and drop it into a tool. The problem with these free tools is if you read the fine print, which nobody does, you just agree to the terms. What it says is any input data you put in these tools now becomes part of the database. Well, now you've just taken very protective, sensitive data and you've waived any trade secret rights to it. You've potentially violated data privacy laws, and it's not a good day.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we can certainly, there are certainly stories out there of developers that put whole code bases early on in the ChatGPT days into the models. And to step back just a moment as well, for anybody who is listening to this, on a repeat or after the fact, or anyone who heard Justine say it, she is not suggesting to destroy the engineers. The data the engineers created will need to be destroyed, but not the engineers. So
I wouldn't even destroy the data. I wouldn't destroy the data. Don't Dustin. Don't you put that on me. But I will encourage curiosity among your engineers and your legal teams and your InfoSec and your privacy teams to say, where did this come from? Do we have the right to use it? And that natural curiosity is going to drive good conversations and good decisions.
So you started talking about a couple of things that I want to, Terrence, I want to turn to you a little bit on, because I know this kind of leads into some of your background as well. Is what is if you're looking at, I need to build a resilient privacy program, I want to build a good strategy, what are some of the practical tools and technologies maybe that I should be thinking about? Maybe I don't have the budget for it this year, or maybe it's maybe I do have the budget this year and I'm and I can look at putting it in place, but what are those technologies, tools, resources that should be out there that I should be looking at?
Another good question. I highly suggest that you invest in a good privacy management platforms. This number of SaaS tools out there, but you're gonna need to, for monitoring those pixels or those cookies, for DSAR requests and things like that. You want to make sure that you have a way to respond to those requests and track them and have a record of them. So say starting there, so with a privacy management software, but also, you need to know, going back to the assets, what type of data you have, where is your data stored? If it's in the cloud, what regions is it stored in? Are you allowed to do cross-border, data transfer? Do you need to keep it within region? So being aware of the regulations and the privacy frameworks that are subject to you, which Justine also mentioned, but also tools like making sure your data is encrypted. If you need to do some type of anonymization, make sure you have tools to do that. DLP, or data loss prevention tools. As Justine mentioned, AI has absolutely changed the way that we probably will work forever. And I have a number of conversations, with organizations that are trying to identify all of the data. And, once you know where it is, you need to do something with it. Generally, you need to do some type of labeling strategy. You want to classify and protect your most sensitive data, whether that's IP, whether it's, HIPAA, healthcare data, other PII, but you want to put controls in place to, I say, protect your end users or employees from putting it in places where it shouldn't go into some of these AI models. And if you have those type of controls in place, even if, let's say, an employee wants to put data into this fancy new, Gen AI tool, they won't be allowed to do that. So things like, cloud access security brokers, or CASBs, or, cloud protection solutions that will look at, the data and make recommendations in line when a user is trying to do something that maybe they shouldn't, but also blocking that. And we can't forget about training. A trained workforce is a more educated and responsible workforce, and a lot of this, regardless of how many tools you put in place, you still need to make sure that the employees are trained on how to handle sensitive data, and they're clear on the do's and don'ts. And yeah.
So first of all, I'll say, Terrence, your check's in the mail for what you just set up for me, because I really do appreciate what you just said. Everything that you just said, is really important, from training to, handling data loss prevention, to everything. Everything, to having good controls in place. Andrew Nickel put in the chat, as a first step, review a good framework. Use it as a baseline. What's really great, and I'm gonna plug here for a moment back to the data privacy and protection CISO toolkit, is we've compiled a lot of this for you. Our CISO members have compiled this. We've put together a list of, here are what are the controls that you should have in place. We've created a data, a customer information protection supplemental resource that talks about all the things you should do around customer data, all of the things around DLP, data loss prevention. We've provided infographics that are really good and really focused on helping the end user, and training them in a way that is not a, here, go take this course, because we all know we love getting those alerts. Hey, you've got this new course that you've got to take, and you've got to take it before, January 31st. Infographics, visuals, explanations, easy to digest, bite-sized stuff. One of the things that I wanted to talk a little bit about, and Justine, I want to start with you on this, and then Chuck, I'm going to come to you on it, is this idea that one of the challenges I think we face oftentimes in security and in business is we want to hold on to data for as long as we can, because we never know when we might use it. We're really bad at hoarding data, because we have that mindset of, I might eventually need it at some point down the line. And that certainly creates all kinds of issues. How important, Justine, is it to focus on your data retention policies and your data retention protocols to say, at some point you have to let go?
Mm-hmm. Well, data retention policy should be renamed to data retention and destruction policy, because it's not just about keeping data, it's about getting rid of it. What you have in the US and beyond are reasonable security requirements to maintain data consistent with the expectation of consumers, but also to only keep it for as long as you need it. And a lot of organizations, as you mentioned, if I had a nickel for every time I heard, and I ask all the time, why do we have this data, particularly in data breaches? Why was this data here? It's usually data that has been sitting around on a shared drive. Sometimes people know it's there, sometimes people don't. It's a convenience. It's been sitting there because it's been either archived, forgotten about. And the challenge with that is, if you don't know it's there, you don't often secure it the way that it needs to be secured in order to protect it. Those good steps Terrence was talking about encryption, the reason we have those is because a lot of these privacy laws have safe harbors. If the data is encrypted, then you don't have to tell people if it gets stolen. So when it comes to data retention and destruction, a good program is going to have, the fundamentals. You got to know the data for the data mapping. You got to know who has access to the data. You got to know how long the data is kept. The beautiful world we live in we're not talking about paper boxes of data anymore. We're talking about digital assets. We're talking about applications that house the data. And the other beautiful thing is, a lot of these allow you to configure the application, not only the security configuration, but how long the data is kept and maintained from the data creation. So you can set it and forget it on these tools and applications, which is going to tell a real good story about how long data is kept and maintained. The other thing I'll mention, and I get this from a lot of clients, is this could be really useful. We don't want to destroy it. We would like to utilize it. That's awesome. How do you want to utilize it? Well, we want to do some benchmarking, or we want to do some aggregate data, or we want to, do all these things. And say, okay, would you need the person's name associated with it? No, we don't need that. Great. Do you need the person's social security number associated with it? No, we don't need that. Fantastic. Start de-identifying the data. You want to use it, you want to play with it, you want to analyze it? Wonderful. Do that. De-identify it. And then the security becomes different, because your security obligations are actually only aligned with the type of data it is. So if you got social security number, your security is got to be up here. You got to have all the things, multi-factor authentication. You got to have encryption. You have all the good security standards. If the data, on the other hand, is aggregate data, it doesn't identify anybody's name, personal data that's going to trigger breach obligations, well, then now your job just got a lot easier.
Absolutely. So, Chuck, from your perspective, what are some of the best practices you've seen and that you've certainly advocated for to allow for the use of data? Because, I know you've worked in organizations that have a desire and a want for data to last for a long time for any number of things. Plus, we obviously live in an era where the college experience is longer than it traditionally was. So you can't say, oh, I'm only going to keep this data for 7 years, because you have students who take 8, 9, 10, 11 years, come back, like myself, who come back 20 years later and go to a school that they went to previously that had a need to keep some level of information. How do you balance that need, the legitimate need for some of this data against the security strategies that you need to implement?
One of the things that I look at is what type of archiving do you have to remove data that doesn't necessarily need to be active all the time, and where to store that. When you look at the specific industries out there, just take healthcare, for example. You've got other regulations and stuff that govern how you protect that data, and they're pretty stringent about the things that you have to do when you're talking about medical data. And that gets to be complicated if you keep it all active and live for any use. And if you get into a hacking situation, then you're going to lose that data very quickly, and you've got a problem. If you look at financial services, you've got the anti-money laundering laws and the fraud detection requirements that are built in for that. On top of trying to do that, and to Justine's point, if you don't need the data out there, you need to put it somewhere and store it where it's not readily accessible, and somebody may have to use different tools or methods to get that. And in our education area, we have FERPA. FERPA is pretty stringent to us in what we can and can't release, and who we can and can't release it to. And sometimes that gets complicated with that. So one of the things we look at here in education is once a student is gone for at least a year, we will archive the data off to another area. And if they come back into the system, then we can go back and retrieve their records and stuff of that nature and bring it back into production. What that all means is the data privacy risk is the longer you keep it active, the more risk you are at having a lot more expense if you do get hacked along the way, or if it gets violated and you give up somebody's social security numbers along with other personal PII information, and it becomes a kind of a nightmare, especially for the legal department, to try to figure out how are we going to compensate for all of this. So when you look at that, I'll take NASA, for example. One of the things that we didn't have when I arrived there was we weren't on the center risk register, meaning that IT risk wasn't considered when they were doling out the money every year. It took me about a year and a half to get added to that. And for the next 3 years, IT became the top center risk at the Johnson Space Center. So we were able to get the funding and stuff we needed to get the products we needed to be able to protect the data and keep and archive off data that was no longer being used. As we know, NASA never doesn't get rid of data; we keep it all. So that creates a more unique problem for handling those types of things. And for those people that want to know, I've seen the film. We did go to the moon, so I just want to put that.
I was about to ask. I was about to say, can you confirm for us this moment, Mr. Layton, that we did in fact put men on the moon?
Yes, we did.
No.
It would surprise no one that the CISO community might have some conspiracy theorists among us.
Yeah.
No, never. So we're coming up towards the end of time. I want to make sure that we get a chance to address some of the questions while we're kind of compiling all the questions together. As we do on this webinar, I want to go through a couple. We've got a couple polling questions that we like to share with our audience. The first one, obviously, is about more about if you're wanting to learn about the cyber risk and cybersecurity collaborative, cyber risk collaborative. This is an opportunity. We can reach out, certainly, and share more information with you. So we'll give everybody a chance to do that while we're going through this. I think one of the things that I certainly wanted to address, or one of the questions that got asked is, and I'll ask this to you, Terrence, first, is, and I'm not going to ask it exactly as it was asked, because I don't want to put you on the spot, since I know you're at Microsoft now, but how important, or how much of the kind of basic things that you can do to protect your data do most organizations have in their environment already, and maybe don't even realize they've got? What are there a lot of capabilities that you don't have to spend any more money than you're already spending because they exist?
That's a great question. We produce a report every year, our digital defense report, and roughly 97, 98% of breaches can be thwarted with basic security controls. When I say basic security controls, things like multi-factor authentication, applying patches, enforcing, least privilege, making sure, and what that means is making sure that everybody doesn't have admin rights in your environment, because the, still most prevalent, attack vector right now is still, spear phishing or business email compromise. And the the blast radius is greatly reduced when the basics like that are implemented. MFA, micro segmentation. So, some of those don't cost a lot of money, to implement, depending on, the providers that you currently have in your environment. On the data security side, implementing, disk encryption on all of your employees, endpoints. If that's Windows, it's BitLocker. It's built in. Even if it's, other devices, encryption is pretty much standard and built in nowadays. So using things like that to at least make it difficult for attackers to get access to your data. But we talk about shadow IT and shadow AI, but sometimes there's shadow data, and that goes back to identifying and maintaining a current data inventory, because you can't protect what you don't know exists. And a lot of organizations find themselves in that scenario with the proliferation of data. And I mean, we create huge amounts of data individually and as organizations each and every day, and we need to, proactively or preemptively put controls in place to plan for that. But it's really, just doing, the basics will go a long way in prevention.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And kind of stepping back a moment, Justine, you had said something that I think is really important, which is the importance of, working hand in hand with your legal team. I think all of us appreciate at this point the importance of working with your internal audit team and making friends with your internal audit team. You should have that same approach with your legal team, because not only one are they going to get you out of a jam when the regulators come knocking, but having them on your side is going to give you that ammunition. You can add well, but legal said we can't do this, or legal said you can do this, or what have you, becomes really beneficial. So one of the
Well,
questions that
oh, go ahead. I was
that
just going
got
to
asked
agree
as
with you
well.
and just say that the laws, these privacy laws, impose obligations on security, and they're not, it's really important to understand them, because they're not just these binary operating systems. These help you get budget. Understanding the laws that your organization has to comply with helps, rather than just saying, hey, we need this and here's why. You need
Yep.
this in order to comply with the laws, and you need the lawyer in your corner. Sorry, Dustin, go ahead and ask your
No,
question.
absolutely. So one of the questions that came in, I'm gonna modify it slightly and ask this to you, Justine. You know, obviously one of the things that we're starting to see with AI specifically is that it will create data for you. It will help generate things for you. Should we be treating that data somehow differently than any other data? Should we be protecting it differently? Should it really be considered similar to any other data that we've got?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. It depends what it is. If you're creating something that you want in the wild, an article, something on your website, then maybe you don't have the same level of protection. But instead, if what you're creating is some source code based on a generative AI platform that is hopefully intrinsic to your organization and on-prem, then yes, you trade it with the same trade secret that you would treat anything else. So I think data classification is really important. Big takeaway, I think, for this group is align your incident response plans and policies with your other definitions of, what constitutes personal information, what constitutes a cyber event. Align it with the other policies within your organization. Look at things like your confidentiality agreements, your non-disclosure agreements, they're called PIAAs, which is a proprietary information assignment agreements. Those all have definitions built in. And privacy, PRIV, is a root word in Latin that means secluded. All that means is what are we trying to keep private and separate from the rest of, our data. And there's different levels and layers based on how private you want to keep something. So I think the big takeaway for this group is data classification, data mapping, good incident response policies, make sure your technology is configured, and talk to your people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, to your point, Justine, the importance of having that good contract language, those good elements. Again, something that's in the data protection, data privacy toolkit that we've created as well, is some of that helpful language to at least be a starting point to go to the legal team, to certainly take and go to your legal team and say, here's like what we want to start with. Can you help us massage it to make it appropriate for us and so that you're comfortable with it? But here's at least a starting point so you can start that conversation. Chuck, one of the questions that got asked, and it's certainly not one that I think you've ever had a problem with, but when you're looking at implementing data privacy controls on a shoestring budget, how do you effectively do that? I mean, and I understand, you've always had as much money as you needed to implement these controls. So, imagine for a moment that you're working at an organization that doesn't have endless amounts of money.
Actually, when I was in DOJ, I built the medical center that I worked at. I called it $10,000 at a time. So you had to have a strategy of what you actually want to do and have a good framework to do that and understand the money. One of the things I've found very helpful in all of the positions that I've had is make friends with the HR people and also your financial management people, because all of this is about risk management, and it's about how you take the available resources along with your financial constraints to get your organization to the lowest risk level that's acceptable to the corporation in there. And so how do you do that? And a couple of things that I've utilized in there is there's always year-end spending in every company. I always have a list ahead of schedule of what I may or may not need or want to implement. And if that money becomes available, then guess what? I'm first in line in there. I also explain to board of directors on a regular basis, this is where we're at. This is where we can get to. This is how it can work for us and make it better for us to get there and work for that. Prime example at the Johnson Space Center, I didn't have a lot of people on my contract team. So me and my contract manager, we sat down and we did a brainstorming session. And we had some high dollar people that left. And in order to create additional positions, what we did was instead of trying to replace them with someone just as qualified, we hired 2 to 3 interns per position. And I doubled my staff in less than a year. And I was able to supplement many of the activities that I couldn't support previously in there.
Yeah, I think so. I think the key takeaway is one, finding creative and innovative ways, but also understanding that many of the tools to do the basic things, to Terrence, to your point, exist. They're there. If you're purchasing, I'll say it so Terrence doesn't have to. If you've got a Microsoft license, you've got, in an enterprise environment, in many cases, you have a lot of the tools in place or available to you to help you. And if you've got, GCP or any of the others out there, you've got these tools in place. MFA is offered on most applications these days, without an extra cost. You should have those capabilities. SSO exists in many of these cases, single sign-on. So the tools and the resources and the things that you need are there. I think, Justine, to your point, I think it's really important that you take an approach of looking at where is your biggest risk, where is your biggest exposure, and addressing that, and not trying to race to the top and the most constrictive, because that may inadvertently disadvantage you, where you're trying to be a good steward but you're actually stifling the business. So thank you, guys. Thank you so much, all of you, all of my panelists, Justine, Chuck, Terrence. Thank you all for being here and for participating in this. Thank you to all of you in the chat. I've seen the chat has been very active on this topic. Thank you all for participating. If we didn't get a chance to get to your question, we will pull those questions and do our best to get you an answer or address the answer in another forum. This, as we start off 2025, we're going to have a lot more events coming forward. We're going to have a lot more of things going on throughout CRA, throughout the Cyber Risk Collaborative. I encourage you to visit cyberriskcollaborative.com, cyberriskalliance.com, scworld.com, which are the 3 kind of big locations where you'll find information. Please reach out to myself, Chris Ancharski, Tom Ward, anyone on our team. For those of you who are members of the Cyber Risk Collaborative's CRC Plus program, please feel free to check out the member portal. The toolkit that we've talked about today is available for you in that portal. Really looking forward to kicking off the rest of this year with all of you. Please stay tuned. Please follow your email for the things that we're going to have going on in the coming weeks and coming months. And again, thank you all for being here today. Have a great rest of your day, great weekend. And again, for those of you on the West Coast who are being affected by it, we send our thoughts and prayers out to you. If you're dealing with the fires, please stay safe. Thank you so much.